fired Mueller, because Mueller was never investigating collusion. Mueller was investigating Trump. And to get Trump investigated for non-collusion, which he says he's doing, they had to shut Mike Flynn up because Mike Flynn knows where the bodies are buried, because in December of 2016, right around the time the unmasking requests start to heat up around Mike Flynn's name from the outgoing Obama administration, Mike Flynn gets a letter from the United Kingdom, as evidenced by Sidney Powell, Mike Flynn's lawyer's legal finding, that Christopher Steele, who wrote the dossier, is full of crap. In other words, Flynn now knows everything. He knows about the Iran deal, the politicization of the intelligence community, and he knows the Steele dossier they used to spy on Trump is total garbage. Flynn has got to go. They're worried Flynn is going to start talking, even though he's been fired. So Mueller gets on board, and they target Flynn ruthlessly. They had to pressure Flynn. Hat tip undercover Huber, by the way, has a great thread on this. Please check it out. At John W. Huber on Twitter. It is worth your time. You're not following that Twitter feed, you're blowing it. He has a great thread on the efforts the Mueller team goes to drop the hammer on Flynn and to get him into a quickie plea. Why? I know quickie pleas. I was on the other side, having done federal agent work myself, involved in many federal arrests. Nobody wants to go to trial in the federal system. They don't. It's a whole lot of work. It's a whole lot of evidence. There's nothing they want more than someone you arrested to say, I did it, I'll take the plea deal. Usually, and once you get the plea deal, you usually get a lesser sentence. Everybody follow? But why the rush with Flynn? If you were really trying to get to Flynn's role in a Russian collusion scheme that Flynn, you believe, had some role in, he was talking with the Russians in December about sanctions, which we know isn't true. And Flynn was this key figure in a Russian collusion scheme. Why such a rush to get him to plea? Why not engage in extended proffers, cooperation agreements over time? Use them to bring down this massive Trump interference scheme that he was doing in turn with the Russians. Why the rush to plea? Well, a couple reasons. Number one, they had to bury the obvious that Obama targeted Flynn in a surveillance hit. Dear FBI, go get his calls. You saw McCabe, no need to go over that again. They wanted that to go away because Obama's their golden calf. Mueller had to make that go away. And if they engage in an extended proffer and if this goes to trial, God forbid, what'll happen? Flynn's lawyers will ask for the information on the surveillance, and they'll get a hold of the information that it was ordered by Obama, which has to go away. So they're hiding that. But they're hiding something else. What is Flynn charged with by Mueller's ridiculously corrupt team? He's charged with, in his interview with the FBI, a month after his phone call. The phone call is December 29th. The FBI interviews Flynn at the White House. He's now the national security advisor. In violation of all protocols, the FBI just shows up at the house. You remember the Jim Comey thing? I sent a few guys over.
Yeah.
January 24th. These two FBI agents show up to interview Flynn about his phone call that happened a month earlier. And these FBI agents allegedly said he lied when they asked Flynn about the contents of the phone call because Flynn talked about sanctions and Flynn didn't tell us he talked about sanctions. So Flynn lied about sanctions? Really? That's interesting. Again, hat tip Stephen McIntyre at Climate Audit on this one. So just to be clear, the Mueller team, I showed you the statement of offense last week, charged Flynn with lying to the FBI agents about sanctions he discussed with the Russians. He discussed sanctions with the Russians? Paul, if you don't mind, can we flip through the 302, the form the FBI wrote up? The edited one, this is. After their interview with Flynn, I want to see where it mentions sanctions in here because they said he lied about sanctions. Talk about expulsion of Russian diplomats, closing of Russian properties. Can we go to page 2? No sanctions there, as I said on Friday. Clearly, sanctions will be here. No sanctions here. This is the FBI's own words. We see expulsions. We see PNGs, persona non grata actions. No talk about sanctions here with Flynn. Surely on page 3, there's some word about Flynn and the sanctions he allegedly lied about. No, they're talking about the expulsions. Again, no word of sanctions anywhere. So now we know what the Mueller team is really up to. They're trying to bury Obama's fingerprints, which are all over the targeting of Mike Flynn, number one. And number two, the Mueller team is trying to hide evidence here. Evidence of what? Flynn never lied. Flynn couldn't have lied about sanctions because the FBI's own paperwork doesn't mention sanctions. The expulsions they do mention of the Russian diplomats were a separate matter from the sanctions on Russia. Flynn couldn't have lied about sanctions because he was never asked. That's their own form. Their own 302, the FBI. You charged him with lying about something you never asked him about. The FBI needed to make this go away. So did Mueller. So by forcing Flynn into a quickie plea in December of 2016, they wouldn't have to show him any of this, and you wouldn't see it either. Flynn lied about sanctions. They didn't ask him about sanctions. It doesn't matter. They would also have to not show you what didn't exist in a trial. Remember, they don't want Flynn at trial because then Flynn will get this. They would also have to show you something that doesn't exist. What do you mean, Dan? It doesn't make any sense. The Mueller team forced him into a quickie deal because they don't want Flynn to see something that doesn't exist. What the heck? That doesn't make any sense. Oh, it does. Remember, the only premise for interviewing Flynn at the White House, the FBI, on January 24th, the interview they allege he talked about sanctions, although it's not even in their own paperwork, the FBI. The only reason they had was because they said it could be a Logan Act violation. You know, the Logan Act, where private citizens get involved in the disputes of the United States. You know, the Logan Act that's never, ever been successfully prosecuted in the history of the United States and is the federal equivalent of it's not even jaywalk, because jaywalking is real and you can actually Logan Act is a joke. It is a total clown show farce. Now you say, Dan, I don't get what you're talking about. The FBI would have to show him something that doesn't exist. The FBI was going to close the case on Flynn. Apparently, internally, they think, oh, well, Flynn was talking to this Russian. Let's just use this Logan Act thing. But why isn't there an EC on the Logan Act? What's an EC? An electronic communication used to open up an FBI case? Joe, get your hat on. Be the referee here.
Yeah, man. Mm-hmm.
If Sidney Powell, Flynn's lawyer, went to trial and Flynn wasn't forced into this quickie plea, he's since withdrawn this guilty plea.
Mm-hmm.
At trial, at some point, someone on the stand is going to have to admit that they interviewed Flynn because they thought Flynn violated the Logan Act, which the court would have erupted in laughter at that point. But in between the laughter, there would have been a serious question by Sidney Powell at this hypothetical trial that never happened. The question from Sidney Powell would have been, when you guys open up a case based on the suspicion of a crime like the Logan Act, you fill out an electronic communication to open up a case, right? Can we see that?
Oh,
can we see the EC on the Logan Act, please? Everybody wait. Joe, just wait. Just what we need to see. Just hold on, Joe. We need to see it, right? Joe, fair question?
Yeah, fair enough.
Joe's as confused as I am. Then if the FBI is interviewing Flynn because they think he violated the Logan Act, then where's the FBI paperwork to open up the case based on the Logan Act? The answer is it's nowhere because it doesn't exist.
There it is.
Why doesn't it exist? Because the FBI did not want to be laughed out of court and humiliating themselves by charging someone with an unconstitutional law no one in the history of the United States has ever been successfully charged with. And it would have looked like from the start the FBI was trying to make an example out of Flynn. So now again, back to Mueller. Why is Mueller trying to force a quickie plea out of Flynn? Plead guilty. Make this all go away, please. But we got to shut you up too, so we're going to threaten you. They don't want you to know Obama's role. They wanted to bury the 302 that doesn't mention sanctions. It only mentions expulsions, but he was charged with lying about sanctions. Really? Because that was never brought up. And they also wanted to hide the Logan Act EC, which doesn't exist, despite it being the FBI's only reason for being at the White House to interview the National Security Advisor in violation of protocol. Now, they got to get Flynn to plead quick. But what's the problem? The problem is they don't have anything on Flynn. You can't go up to a defendant or a person you're charging and say, General, listen, here's the case we have against you. It's open and shut. This is how Flynn, they're producing the evidence. Oh, that's what they're producing the evidence to Flynn. They don't have anything. Flynn knows he didn't do this. Flynn knows he didn't lie. Flynn knows the Logan Act is nonsense. Flynn knows they have a transcript, and Flynn knows he didn't lie about sanctions. So instead of giving him the evidence, what do? They don't give him the evidence. They hid the 302. You tracking? And they hid the EC on the Logan Act that doesn't exist. They didn't actually show him the videotape. They showed him nothing. Instead, they leaked to the media because they had nothing to show him. Sorry, that's where I was going with that. I rarely lose, but I was enjoying that story so much. Proof, again, hat tip undercover Huber. Remember, Flynn pleads guilty in December of 2016. I'm sure his original law firm, Covington Berlin, which insists he's innocent, they did a terrible job, but they would not admit he did anything wrong. They're feeling the heat in November. Look at these leaks to the media. NBC News, check this out. By shocker, Ken Delaney and Fusion Ken, you know Ken, big Spygate hoaxer, collusion hoaxer. NBC News. Mueller has enough evidence to bring charges in Flynn investigation, November of 2017, by Fusion Ken Delaney. Where did NBC News and Fusion Ken get that? Where did they get that? Well, of course they got it from the Mueller team, which conveniently leaked to Fusion Ken, known collusion hoaxer and fake news specialist, propaganda guy, that Ken will write it up. And what do you think happens? Of course, Flynn's team's reading that. Oh my gosh, the public pressure. Of course, the Trump team is reading that too. This is November of the next year, 2017. Trump's in office. Like, oh my gosh, this is all bad. This is really chaotic. Mueller's got the goods. If he had the goods like the 302 and the Logan Act EC, then why didn't he show Flynn the goods? Because they didn't have the goods. So they leaked it to a couple of idiots at NBC who printed the fake goods. Oh, it gets better. Some of you may say, well, Dan, that 302, it was edited a lot, and there's no real evidence an original 302 exists or anything, the 302 of the Flynn meeting. Maybe the original 302 just disappeared and that stuff happened. Oh, I got more on that in a second. All right, so now we know, again, the Mueller team's panicking. They need Flynn to please so they don't go to trial, so you see all of what I just told you. They leaked to NBC. Fusion Ken's more than happy to put out, Mueller's propaganda, which they do. But there's this running controversy about the case, because they're trying to hide something else, too, from Flynn's defense team. And Flynn will get it if it goes to trial. I showed you the 302 with the expulsions, the FBI form where it doesn't mention sanctions. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the edited one. You may say, edited from what? Oh, there's an original 302. Well, Dan, why don't you show us the original 302? Why'd you show us that expulsion highlights from Stephen McIntyre on an edited 302? Because nobody has the original 302, Ski. Nobody. Nobody has a... Wait. Come on. This is crazy. This is like Cuba stuff. This is like North Korea stuff. So you're telling me the FBI interviews Flynn on January 24, charges him with lying about sanctions they never asked him about, according to their own 302. But there's another 302 they filled out on the same day they interviewed Flynn that's magically disappeared, and that's the edited one? The best they can do is an edited one, which still is damning. Doesn't even talk about sanctions? My gosh, can you imagine what's in that original one that magically nobody can seem to find? So, of course, Fusion Ken and other media collusion hoaxers will tell you, well, the original 302 just doesn't exist. Really, hat tip at Technofog on Twitter, another just terrific account you need to follow. Hat tip Techno, here's Jim Comey's own testimony. Remember, Joe, media hoaxers, there's no original 302. You guys are making that up. That's fascinating because Jim Comey testified under oath and said this, quote, and they interviewed him, Flynn, completely. They went through it all. They did not show him the transcript or transcripts, and then came back and drafted a 302 and reported it to me and the deputy director. And then I briefed the White House on the contents of what Mr. Flynn had said. That is on the 24th of January. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So, hack Jim Comey worst director in FBI history, not only admits there is a 302 filled out on the same day, but he briefed the White House the same day of the interview. Gosh, they seem awfully curious about Mike Flynn, that White House, don't they? Where's that original 302? We can seem to find the original 302. Why? Why? Can you imagine how bad the FBI's original interpretation of Flynn's interview is? If they had to edit it for 3 weeks, and even the edited version I showed you still doesn't mention the actual crime they charge him with. Can you imagine how bad the original one is? Oh, yeah. Ooh. Now, the lies about the 302 that nobody knows where it is. It's in the Ren and Stimpy land. Even Mueller's own prosecutor, Brendan Van Grack, who was prosecuting Flynn, seems to be, shall we say, misdirecting people about the 302. Here's a signed document by Van Grack and Jesse Liu working for the Mueller probe to the court. Among these documents, these are documents they turned over to Flynn's team, are all versions in the government's possession of the FBI report of the January 24, 27 interview of the defendant, Mike Flynn. Really? So Van Grack, Mueller's prosecutor, is now telling the court there is no other 302? Well, we don't have it. I just showed you Comey's testimony that there was a draft of the 302. Did they miss that? Did they where is it? Oh, it gets worse. Hat tip Catherine Harrods. These are her highlights. Another great account to follow. She's at CBS now. Terrific work on this case. These are her highlights. This is more from Jim Comey about what's possibly in that original 302. Oh, this gets good. Remember what Flynn was charged with? And they leaked to the media about prosecuting his son so he can get him to plead to a crime he didn't commit. He's charged with lying to the FBI. Really? Because this is Comey's own testimony. Quote, and the FBI agents, and the reason I mention their experience is because I talked to them about this. Comey's talking about the FBI agent who interviewed Flynn. Listen to this. They discern no physical indications of deception. Wait, what? I thought you charged him with lying. Oh, it gets worse. This is Comey's own testimony. They didn't see any change in posture, tone, inflection, or in eye contact. They saw nothing that indicated to them that he knew, Flynn, that he was lying to them. Wait, one more. There's more here. Comey goes on to say, and they interviewed him completely. They went through it all. Again, they didn't show him the transcript or transcripts, and then they came back and drafted a 302. So, just again, the 302, which is edited like crazy, we have seen, doesn't even mention Flynn talking about sanctions. Although the Mueller team charged Flynn about lying about sanctions he wasn't even asked about. Comey's team that interviewed him comes back and briefs Comey. Comey swears to this on the record, indicates they had no evidence at all he was lying. Matter of fact, their evidence was he was telling the truth in their interview. But then the Mueller team goes and charges him with lying about sanctions he wasn't asked about, despite the FBI thinks wasn't lying. And then the Mueller team tells the court, we don't even have the original document we know the FBI filled out about the interview where they didn't think he was lying. Now, you may say, this case can't possibly get any worse. We've now walked through it from the beginning. Again, Obama ordered the hit. The FBI complied. They interview him on a Logan Act violation they weren't even willing to put down on paper because it's fake. They then come back and say, hey, we don't even think he was lying. They then edit the form where they write that, the 302, which is magically in the Ren and Stimpy left sock land. They then charge him with lying about sanctions they never asked him about. The Mueller team then lies about the original 302, saying, hey, we don't have it. It doesn't exist. Comey said it existed. And now you say this can't possibly get any worse. We have this fake judge, Judge Sullivan, not a real, he doesn't deserve to be called judge anymore, who won't dismiss this case, unbelievably, despite the government saying we can't prosecute this case against Flynn anymore. And here's Sullivan, hat tip at Hans Monkey on, forgive me if I'm saying your name wrong, Hans, another great Twitter account. MAHNCKE, by the way, if you want to, at Hans Monkey, who picked this out, or Monkey, forgive me, it's not intentional, I'm terrible with names. This is the judge in the case. When the FBI and the DOJ, Joe, they refused to produce this original 302, which probably says Flynn wasn't lying in it. Nobody can find it. And here's the judge, this hack. He says the government, I'm sure, will address that. I don't want to focus on any other cases before the court, but sometimes throughout the best efforts notwithstanding, the best efforts of everyone, things happen and documents are lost. I mean, it just happens.
Okie dokie.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Here's the judge. Happens. Fill it in with the S. Rhymes with pit. That's the judge. The judge bumper sticker. Pit happens. That's your response? That don't worry about it. The original 302, which I'm telling you says Flynn wasn't lying, has magically disappeared in favor of an edited 302 that's still bad. Doesn't even mention the sanctions he allegedly lied about. The FBI can't find it, and the judge is like, no worry, folks. Stuff happens. Good job, Judge. West Judge is great. This is an embarrassment to the bench. If you are ever appearing in front of this guy in federal court and you are a Republican or a conservative or anyone associated with Donald Trump and you think you're going to get an even remotely fair trial, you are crazy. That is turning into a third world Soviet style, old star chamber. Now, I wanted to get to this story last week, showing you how bad Judge Sullivan actually is. The judge in the Flynn case. The Department of Justice has now acknowledged that they found all these FBI materials, all this exculpatory material from Flynn, that they have no case. After laying out what I just laid out to you, it's obvious not only is there no case against Flynn, he didn't lie, he never lied about sanctions, he was never asked about sanctions, and the FBI's own notes, the note taker, Bill Pricestep, who's the interviewing agent who interviewed Flynn's boss, is writing down on paper, what's our goal? To set him up in a perjury trap? Not only does the government not have a case against Flynn, there's a legitimate case against the government here.